Allora, ringrazio Marta Donzelli per essere venuta in questo caloroso sabato di luglio e di aver accettato di fare questa conversazione. Marta Donzelli è da qualche mese presidente del Centro Sperimentale di Cinematografia.
Conversation, she has become president of the Centro Sperimentale di Cinematografia, and it was a good occasion not only to present the films of the Cineteca Nazionale, but
questo pomeriggio alle 2:30
this afternoon at 2:30 in the Arena del Sole
vedere la versione
we're going to
restaurata
see
di
the
Harlem,
restored version of Harlem, which is an event, and then in the afternoon the presentation of the book,
ma anche parlare
but also
di questi primi
talking
mesi
about these first
sua
months of her experience and the prospects
dell'inizio di una
and the start
politica che riguarderà il centro sperimentale ma anche la Cineteca.
Politics that will regard also the Centro Sperimentale as well as the Cineteca Nazionale. Marta Donzelli doesn't need any presentation because she is a well-known producer in Italy and one of the most interesting ones, along with
ha dato vita assieme a Gregorio Paonessa a Vivo Film dal 2004. Vivo Film ha scoperto e realizzato, ha scoperto molti talenti del cinema italiano e ha realizzato alcuni dei film più interessanti del cinema italiano
one of the most interesting
film che sono stati
some of the most interesting
films nei principali festival internazionali, hanno vinto premi importanti e poi
she won important awards.
Ha avuto una vita
and these films have been distributed in the Italian movie theaters. Marta, I'm going to ask you a question. Slightly naive, so to speak. Why did you accept this role, being president of an institution that is very, very important, one of the most important institutions of cinema in our country, and for a producer who every year produces very many films, I believe it was not an easy choice.
So let me thank you on my turn for this invitation. I'm really honored and happy. And probably it's the first time I speak in front of an audience since I was appointed in this institution. So I'm very happy that I speak here in Bologna, such an important place that I have always liked, first as a spectator and then producers over the past, and then today with the new role I'm covering, it can represent something different. So thank you. This morning I was thinking when I woke up and I was starting thinking about this conversation, that the name of this festival should be considered as our slogan. So we have to find again cinema, even in a wider sense. So maybe you imagine and you envisage this name thinking about archives, heritage, but I think that we have a very important task concerning our present, our future. So all my congratulations for this name that is acquiring even a wider meaning. So to go back to your question, So my first reaction was a complete surprise because I didn't think they could offer me this position, this role. So my first reaction was, kind of shock and even fear, because it's a very challenging task. And I was not ready, from a psychological point of view. But I think I did the right thing in accepting this offer. And I think that I decided to accept this offer because, very humbly, I wanted to see if I can have an impact or influence public policies. So as citizens, we have to do what we can to influence things, to influence policies. So we have this duty to act, and this is the relationship between private and public. So by following this challenging pathway, and I have another professional career, but since I wanted to devote my time even to something else, so I'm happy, that I can do something for the community, because I strongly believe in the importance of such a cultural institution like Centro Sperimentale, gathering the Italian National Cinematheque and the cinema school, so offering a huge potential. So my wish is to be helpful, to use also my managerial experience and in working both on a creative basis, but also on something practical, helping these institutions so that we can support it, and of course in cooperation with many people who have been working on this for years. What did you know about the two souls of the Centro Sperimentale? And what is your idea now after a few months? And if there is a way to have these two souls of the institution, being in touch and conversing the one with the other. So the impression is that everybody knows the Centro Sperimentale, but then you realize when you work for it that the structure, the dimension is to discover many things that you didn't know. I mean, and the school is a center of excellence, and considering my personal experience, we work with many authors who obtained their diploma in the Centro Sperimentale, and screenplay writers or head of production. But in working in this school, I realized that from a facility point of view, this school represents an excellent, a center of excellence. You have devices, machines, state of the art, and so so this school can be considered as a model. And then the National Cinematheque, and I'm attaching huge importance on it because it has a large heritage, a huge heritage, and in particular, it is the place devoted to film preservation of the present and the future of the film industry, the Italian film industry, because it's the place where you preserve films. So being also a producer, I'm used to deal with all the bureaucratic aspects. So I started to think about the importance of this function. So I think that the Cinematheque should develop further in several directions, and the founding institution of Cinematheque, that is that of collecting, preserving heritage, should be central, essential. Because the fact of, needing a legal deposit, it means that you also have to think about the current situation of the film. So the other day, I was interviewed about the differences between Italy and France. And so the audiovisual supply chain, the French one and the Italian, they asked me my opinion. And in my point of view, there is a huge difference because in France you find many contemporary film producers with important libraries. For example, as for Gaumont-Pathé, they have this archives, that they have been established when the cinema was created, Studio Canale as well. So there are many French realities owning a very important catalog, and they are also crucial players in the current production, contemporary production. And if you consider the attendees of the Cinema Ritrovato over these years, you see the owners of Gaumont, the owners of Pathé. Tomorrow evening there will be Nathalie Canmezza by MK2, Bobert, who is an independent producer. He comes to the Cinema Ritrovato every year. So if I think about Italy, if I think about Italian producers, well, not so many attend the film festival here in Bologna. Occhi Pinti likes, for example, to come to the Cinema Ritrovato festival. But this awareness that is really strong in France, how important is the film heritage and how this could be a driver of the production activity, and how important it is to invest in this heritage. I think this is one of the main characteristics of the French film industry, and this does not occur in Italy. And I would like that, of course, the situation changes because the history of the Italian film industry is not so far away, so different from the French one. So since you are a producer, you know, so the production business, you know Annika, you know the Centro Sperimentale and the National Cinematheque, so you have this dual point of view. So don't you think this is a bad defect of the Italian film industry? I think that you are right, and I think that maybe this is also due to the fact that the Italian production histories were following many ups and downs. And so there is a kind of dispersion of a continuum, a continuity in preserving the film heritage. And in this country, we were not able to put up a system, you know, to create a network among all the different bodies and entities in charge of preserving the heritage. I think that this approach hopefully will change, and this is also the desire of the minister. But for example, Centro Sperimentale and Istituto Luce, which are located one in front of the other, they haven't worked together over the past. But I also think we are going through a deep changing time, a change in times. And over the last years, many investments were placed in this industry. And this makes the difference. I think we can also use the opportunity of the Recovery Fund, where the issue and the topic between technology and the preservation of heritage could become a crucial topic. And I think that we have to understand how to give value to all this and what choices we should make. I think that facilities and technologies play a fundamental role in order to make a quality progress, in order to bridge the gap in information dissemination, for example. And I think this is a very fascinating topic.
How can we use new technologies really to create a value, maybe creating potentially a system that was not there, but we can envisage. Vis-à-vis the Recovery Fund, what pieces of news do you have on the reverberation it can have on the Centro Sperimentale? According to what the rumors that are around, well, Cinecittà has a specific project followed, of course, by an important investment linked to the investment on the part of the studios. But there is also a part of these funds that is destined directly to the Centro Sperimentale, devoted both to the theme of the training as well as infrastructural investments with a perimeter that is defined, but according to which we have we have a space of a project that is specific that should be triggered or activated nowadays. It's about 40 million euros, the ones that are destined to the project Cinecittà, and we are starting today. Yesterday I was just calling up to know where we are, where we stand. But there is a big job that is also a big responsibility. It's an occasion that comes just about once in a lifetime. So it's a big opportunity as well, big concern. I believe that there are very many ideas possible, but part of these resources I would like to think the same ways that you mentioned, a country investing on the enhancement of one's heritage. It would be the first time, because while when comparing ourselves with France, we know that France's system is the outcome of a long elaboration that has induced the French state to create its own Cinémathèque along with experimental center. Then there has been along with the Cinémathèque Française. Then there was the battle between the Cinémathèque and the state, and as a matter of fact, this became a true policy vis-à-vis the heritage preservation and all the works connected to the preservation. In Italy, we have proceeded this way. The Cineteca Nazionale happens to be within the Centro Sperimentale and ends up playing a role that is significant but less important than the first aspect of the Centro Sperimentale's purpose is, that is the one of training. So, as a matter of fact, things are partly realized without ever a total framework, and in a world that was changing very rapidly. You quoted the name of Cinema Ritrovato. We imagined this in 1986, and in 1986 it was a completely different world. In 1986, VHS was not existing, and making a retrospective of great authors was a titanic enterprise, and making them, and it was a complex thing to do.
Oggi evidentemente siamo in un altro mondo.
And we are in another world where we have in our pockets a Cineteca, but at the same time you can access this huge offer, and it is an ever more complex thing to do. So what is your idea on what could be the great projects, the major projects in the coming 3 years of the Centro Sperimentale? To me, there is a level, a basic level that is very important, that is the investment on the ordinary function of the Cineteca Nazionale vis-à-vis what I just stated before. There is and one of the first things that we are carrying forward with the new CDA is restructuring of One is a set theater. The Centro Sperimentale has 3 theaters. One went on went off in an arson some years ago, and I think, so the restructuring of one of these three. And since the Cineteca has problems of space that are complicated because they make quite difficult to work in there, and this type of work needs spaces, we are making a modification of the project, a change in the project that has been approved. So the idea is to realize in this theater the headquarters of the Cineteca, so widening the spaces for the preservation and creating spaces that are more suitable for all the spaces devoted to restoration and lab, and making spaces of access to the public. So the idea, generally speaking, is to have this institution more open and render it more accessible from the outside. So, cataloging and carrying out the provisions by law. So the ordinary basis is, and to this extent, this project
sostanzialmente anche simbolicamente.
And symbolically, this is very important.
Poi diciamo l'altro grande progetto.
The other big project
è quello, diciamo, di ragionare sulla possibilità di dotare il centro sperimentale. Ci auguriamo di una sala, cioè di fare un investimento.
And we want to make an investment because currently the Centro Sperimentale has a room for an internal experimental space, but the big theme vis-à-vis the enhancement and the value attribution of the heritage, I believe that today the Cineteca have film archives, have a fundamental role towards cinema in the widest sense of the word. So the topic of the training of the viewers, the spectators, or the recovery, or the contact with the spectators is fundamental. And as you just said, to some extent, I know much better the problems of distribution of the but parallelisms are very clear, because I believe that the topic of an offer that is potentially, that is infinite, that blocks the access, because what we are missing is the care in the sense of patronage and guided tours, so to speak, that induce us to bump into interesting contents that are not only the contents that are only offered to you in the front, because there is such a huge advertising investment that you open up a platform and what you see first is what you're going to be seeing just later on. So this end that is very fundamental in cinema, and the possibility of having new authors build, new authors grow and hear new voices from this scenario, is similar also in the field of what can be done by a film archive or Cineteca versus the heritage. So I believe that we can work in a parallel way. There is a focus on the movie theater, because in 1986 you could only see it this way, and it was rare. Now you risk to have huge entire generations that have not seen the history of cinema in a movie theater, in a hall, in a room, and the fact of seeing the history of cinema in a cinema theater induces new generations to see the future cinema and see it in a movie theater. So this, and I believe that the pattern of this festival should be proposed in other cities and in all other in all other cineteche, that could become triggering a flywheel for other initiatives of the like. But we can think also about technological investment, because from the point of view of the preservation as well as the dissemination, we have possibilities that should be explored.
E che credo, adesso dico delle cose molto vaghe, imprecise, però diciamo la possibilità di
I think the possibility
informazioni, di anche, come dire, immaginare brutalmente, non lo so, che il deposito di legge avvenga in maniera non fisica, ma virtuale in qualche modo, cioè aprono degli scenari
so we have scenarios that are totally new,
vadano esplorati con una progettualità che deve partire adesso. Quindi,
with a project that has to start now. I don't know if I've been clear, but I believe that you have been quite clear in your explanation. The other big theme is that Centro Sperimentale and Cineteca Nazionale and the other cinetecas and the relationship of collaboration that up to now in Italy have always been just an hypothesis. And I believe that today, as never before, in front of all the challenges that have become huge, well, I believe
sia fondamentale ampliare.
I believe that it's important to widen, to extend the collaborations, and in order to pursue common projects, because certain projects that necessarily have to involve various archives, film archives. If there is no project,
le conseguenze.
Sì, no, io appunto su questo, lo sai, ce lo siamo detto.
You know, we have said this.
Intanto credo sempre che
and
il
I
dialogo e la
believe
collaborazione siano dei buoni
that the
modi per fare
dialogue
cose buone. E poi credo anche che, come dire, nell'ambito del tipo di attività che
the type of activity that we want to carry forward is, well, competition can be there, but up to a certain point. The word competition in Cineteca gives me the chills, gives me goosepimples. Basically, it must win over the common target that we have to reach. And this applies even more for the Cineteca Nazionale, that in this sense has characteristics that are implied in its statute, in its charter, that oblige it to be and activate collaborations, concrete collaborations with all the Italian Cineteca. So we will carry forward common projects. I'm in an attitude that is study as well as learning. So there is an aspect in these first months of my post is fun, and discovering new things is always a nice thing. Every now and then you forget about it and you learn all the time. And when you start doing new things, there is something unexpected. But for instance, in these months, all the topic of the digitalization and finding standards and having a mapping of Italian film libraries are interesting and fascinating topics, but it's necessary to put together teams and working groups that together consider possible results as well as investments, because this is the personal sensation when they told me, well, it's a lot of money, and the expense and the moment in which project and how to do it. And I believe that it's important to have a concrete and a rapid choice about it. That not always is possible. If decision-making is wider, I believe that expertise helps out. So I hope that I can start a season of collaboration, and since the Cineteca of Bologna plays such an important role in this moment, recognized internationally, well, surely I think that it's fundamental that we entertain common dialogue and on the projects together vis-à-vis scenarios that are wider. Thank you, Marta, because it has not always been like that, and I believe that the collaboration on some projects today is absolutely essential. I believe that Italian Cinetecas must abide by common standards on the Italian cinema heritage. They should agree on basic principles on restoration and what it means to restore a film, and in particular what it means to pass on from digital film, because the digital is something wonderful, yes, but it offers possibilities that are very, very wide. And on each film, for each film, there are very many approaches that you can adopt. So it would be right to decide upon together basic principles that are in common. And then, as you mentioned rightly, the whole technology aspect, the preservation of digital data, is today a huge issue on which I believe that in our country we're quite still behind as to the preservation of the digital data of audiovisual. Then there is a further theme would be worthwhile in having policies that are at least parallel. How can we learn, how can we disseminate the history of cinema to the future generations? Because it's obvious that for a scholar or student of the university, cinema's history is Quentin Tarantino and David Lynch in the best of the realm of possibilities, and we are lucky to preserve a huge heritage of 126 years of history of cinema, and so on this we have to find the right strategies and being able to change our actions. Also bearing in mind that in Italy laws have been issued that are very positive in this sense, and that, for instance, in the last law decree on cinema, there is the presence of an important the presence in the school, the cinema should be present in the schooling curricula. So we should have a teamwork game, and that was missing up to date, and it's final. So it's evident that if in the future there are not going to be halls in Italy that are going to be devoted to the heritage, there is not going to be an experience to see the history of cinema in the movie theaters, and there is not going to be a politics that goes through history defending the history of cinema, it's quite evident that we risk in our country to forget and we risk to lose our culture, identity, and we are different from other countries because cinema is an identity feature, but we know it, of course, we at the Cinema di Trovato, we know it well, we know it in some institutions of our country, but not in all.
I do agree completely. So the mention we've made about the project on going back to cinema from Cineteca Nazionale is somehow, I hope, so that it would be a starting point for a wider project that should be developed and having to do with the work we have to carry out locally with theaters, which is essential, and it enhances our heritage and the exchange with the heritage of other countries. And I really would like that to see that expand, the role of film archives, and I think that you are doing it throughout the year. So your focus is to give room or give space to audiovisual products from throughout the time. So there is a big topic about the national heritage, the heritage from the past, future, or not the cinema of other countries, of the world cinema, and also the future, starting from the position that there are so many interesting ideas that do not find enough room to reach the audiences. And I think there is the big topic that could be seen as a threat to the freedom of speech. I'm starting about thinking to the fact, for example, that all the topics about the gender equalities, inclusion that you find on platforms almost obsessively hide instead a very large topic which is forgotten. Of course, Netflix now is paying attention in producing films of women as a director, LGBTQ stories, that ethnic groups are represented. But those contents, those stories have a very strong control from the ideation. The role of public institutions, and also I think this is the role of the European investment in production of public cinema, is to assure express rooms or spaces of free expression and looking different things, looking at experimental movies, moving into the most disparate directions. But so there is no standardization of language challenges, I do believe this represents an element that should be supported, preserved, protected, and this is also a very interesting topic for school education. On young people, young talents, we need to provide young filmmakers the opportunities to make what they want in the early films and to express their voices. Of course, now there's so much. You can find work. And this, so you can also, you are commissioned to make a movie in a second thing again. But this is very dangerous because then we might run the risk of not having any more spaces for free expression. And so this is another side of the topic, like what you said, Gianluca. That is to say, the training, education, not only for people that really want to enter into the cinema field, but no, the work on young school children, young people. There are so many resources we can tap on. So considering the resource we have, perhaps we do not have enough projects, and I think that we should really start working on that, because I do believe we have to start a cinema film education from schools. Yesterday I met a person at the cocktail of FIAF. My motto instead also restoring movies, but we also have to restore audiences, viewers, a restoration work on viewers, undoubtedly. So we come to the conclusion of our conversation. I would like to thank you that the first time a president of Experimental Cinema Center comes to the Cinema Ritrovato. Really is a historical moment. Really, I would really like to thank you for your humility, your being down to earth. This is really rare, I assure you, and we are not used to it, that a president of an institution so important such as this one is so down to earth, so humble, open. And so what you said, because you really have a pulse on reality, and also you want to change the big issues, change approaches. And I think that in this your new civic engagement, so you have the same courage, the same moral strength that brought you to produce together with Gregorio Paunes such a beautiful film, and so impossible before, but now really, really that. Thank you, and I wish you all the best. Thank you to you.